With the recent news from the Air Force and Space Force that they're dropping the next TACfI round on Friday, June 5th, I wanted to record a quick video. This will basically be a condensed masterclass. With the due date from the Air Force being June 29th, it's a very quick turn, so I want to go ahead and get this information out about this program. So let's dive in. Here's some of the things we'll be covering, but let's go right into it. Here at Long Capture, again, very familiar with the SBIR program. We've done a ton of different TACfI and StratFi submissions and awards, and SBIR 1s and 2s and all of that. So very familiar with these programs. So let's hit on TACfI overall. This is basically, it's another acronym. So AFWORKS is not one, but Tactical Funding Increase is what TACfI stands for. The dollar amounts are anywhere from $375,000 up to $2 million. It really depends on how much matching you can provide at time of submission. So it requires either government or private funds. We're going to break those down. It can be in a sequential phase 2 award, which means a second separate phase 2 award, or an enhancement, a plus up to an existing phase 2. There's some major benefits to executing it as an enhancement, which I've broke down in other videos. We'll get into a little bit of that today. This is really for the Department of the Air Force as well as Space Force as well. You need to have end users and customers from those organizations. Generally, there's an asterisk there, joint, and some other exceptions may apply. But you need them to be supporting this project. There needs to be a benefit to the Air Force if you're submitting to get this money from the Air Force. Same for Space Force on the Space Force side. So really meant to be a bridge and help start crossing the valley of death. And I'll just say, overall, the way that we look at TACfI is, the first thing we always do with our clients is we're looking at the North Star. Where do we think this technology can ultimately scale? Which program office do we think this fits under? Can it fit under an existing program of record, for example? I've seen TACfI and StratFi and other programs like this be used. I mean, yeah, it's great to get $2 million on TACfI or $15 million from StratFi, but when used correctly, this is actually helping you cross the valley of death. And the way that you do that is by looking ahead and figuring out who are these transition partners, who's actually going to have the really big dollars to roll this technology out at the enterprise level across multiple different bases or major commands or compact commands, whatever it might be. So that's really the power when you use it right, is helping build those relationships, help make additional changes to the technology, potentially cover things like authority to operate, getting additional features and capabilities added that the warfighter is asking for, and getting it paid for by this program with really great data rights, especially compared to the normal scenario where Department of Defense or other federal governments like paying you to develop something. They usually have a lot of reach and a lot of rights that they assert. The SBIR program, and this being under that umbrella, gives you really strong data rights for you to then move to sole source contracts and really scale up, again, the revenue and the impact that you're having. So let's talk about some eligibility. You still need to be a small business at time of award. This is different from everything else in federal where it's at time of submission. So if you get acquired, I saw a company go through this recently where they were acquired over a certain time period and then they weren't eligible for a SBIR award. So at time of award, you still need to be considered a small business. Again, you need to have a phase 2 SBIR or STTR. So this phase 2 can be ongoing, or it ended within the last 2 years, and that clock is measured from when the last deliverable in the phase 2 was to when you submit for the TACfI. So that one's based on time that you submit the package. So that's something really important to pay attention to. You can't have more than one sequential award. And I'll go on a tangent here that I think is super important. If possible, you want to execute your TACfI as an enhancement. You want this to be a modification or a plus up to your ongoing or an existing phase 2. There's some different things you can do there to make that timeline work. We'll just leave it at that. It needs to be, if it's during the phase 2 that you get this award and you plus it up, that leaves the door open for a sequential award still. That being StratFi, as an easy example, an additional $15 million. So if you execute it right, you can get this TACfI as an enhancement, and you can get a second sequential award as the StratFi that adds $15 million to your pipeline and potentially to your revenue. If you recently received a phase 2 award, you need to be on that award for at least 90 days from when it started to when you submit. So at least 90 days have to pass before you're allowed to submit. And that's kind of the big pieces for this one. Requirements. So here's a quick overview of a lot of the different pieces that go into the package. Again, I'll say, this may be tweaked a little bit. What I'll add to this slide compared to previous iterations is that there's a bigger emphasis on foreign ownership. They're going to be doing a lot more due diligence, a lot more disclosure required from the company related to foreign ownership, especially China, but other countries like Iran, Russia, things like that are not going to be allowed and will get you potentially disqualified from submitting. Now, we don't totally know what this due diligence is going to look like. In recent years, they've been able to really look deeply into the cap table and find even investors that were loosely associated. So it's pretty rigorous at this point, looking into the cap table, the ownership. So that's a bigger requirement. But overall, these are all the different documents that are going to go into a successful and a compliant submission. Overall, we hit the dollar amounts earlier. So it's a one-to-one match. The big piece here, different from TACfI and other programs, is that it's either or. You can't do both. So on the dual use option, what we usually see this be is venture capital investment. So if you raised $2 million or more after your phase 2 award within the last 2 years, again, all these silly timelines here, but if you check those boxes, then you're eligible to just go and submit for the $2 million. You need a kernel level signature. We'll probably hit on that in a minute. But overall, a lot of companies we work with, they're already doing the venture capital raise. They happen to raise, $2 million or 10 or 30 or whatever after their phase 2 award. You just need to match $2 million of that and provide some documentation there as part of the package, some letters and things like that to be able to submit. Defense only. So that means you're getting money from the government under what could be a phase 3 or a subcontract. There's a lot of different options and definitions here. It's fairly flexible. The one piece that I'll say is not flexible is from time of submission, you can go back 6 months. And it's not when the contract was set up. It's whatever money was obligated, whatever money was added to that contract within that 6-month window. So if you had $2 million added to a contract on, let's say a phase 3 or a production OT, something like that within the past 6 months, you can check that box as long as you can say, hey, that work is related to the cyber work and benefits the TACfI and the development of the tech that we're doing for the warfighter, for the Air Force or Space Force under this program. So that's pretty cool. Big difference here with TACfI is all this needs to be documented and in place at time of submission. With TACfI, there's a lot more flexibility there, but this is all you got to provide, again, hopefully be able to max it out at time of submission. You can't make those changes after the fact. So that really comes into play of can you ask for 375 or can you ask for, all the way up to 2 million. Overall, this is a quick overview of what happens after you're submitted. So there's initial reviews, there's functional reviews, review boards. Again, we'll see if any of this changes with the new cycle, post reauthorization. But overall, this is generally the process. There's a couple of different reviews. Generally, I'll just say if you're getting communication from the government during this time period, it's a good sign. If they're asking for more information or clarification or, hey, this document was, whatever it might be, it's a good sign. I'll just leave it at that. Okay, overall, for timelines, so with the due date being on June 29th of 2026, again, at the time of this recording, they may change it. They have in the past. As of right now, that's the hard deadline on the Air Force side. On the Space Force side, it is rolling. So these timelines may not be as strict on the Space Force side because of that rolling submission. Waiting to hear, and we'll see if they're doing quarterly reviews or are they reviewing as packages come in. That's still a little bit of a question mark. Still a little bit new. The Space Force did rolling submissions on the TACfI last year for the first time. So we don't actually know how long that window will be open or if it would potentially be open indefinitely for fiscal year 26. Some questions still there. But generally, we've got a less than a 30-day window to get submitted. After that, you're likely going to hear back in a couple of months. Let's say 2 to 4 months is typically what we've seen. Again, there's a lot of variation there. Sometimes it's been much faster, sometimes it's been much slower. Once they make that selection, you have to use the contracting shop that's part of your overall package that you're submitting. I'm basically going to send it to local contracting. So when I talked earlier about doing the enhancement and adding to that phase 2, that becomes more difficult because a lot of times AFWorks and SpaceWorks are not the ones actually executing this contract. So that means local cons, local cons mean local contracting, being unfamiliar with SBIRs and not having your phase 2 award in their contract writing system. That's where a lot of challenges come up in being able to do that play and execute the enhancement rather than checking the box and losing out on your sequential to potentially use that for a TACfI or SBIR Catalyst or other awards later on. Okay, let's just do a quick comparison of some of the other programs out there that are really aimed at helping cross the valley of death. On the TACfI side, it's up to $15 million in matching. They make announcements making it look like the awards are 40 or 50 or $60 million. That is counting the matching money coming from the government. I'll just say that. Again, I hit on this earlier. We'll see if they push up the $15 million SBIR dollar match for TACfI. I think that they can under the new language for the SBIR program, but yet to be seen. So TACfI requires more matching pieces. It's still research and development funding. It's still SBIR dollars, and that's the same for SBIR Catalyst under the Army and Catapult under the Navy. So this is all from the SBIR pot of money with different matching requirements. On the Army side, they've made it quite a bit different. They really want you working with an integrator, so with a larger prime contractor, OEM, those types. The Army really views this program and their approach as, hey, you're probably bringing a capability that benefits a larger overall capability. Again, one of our clients that's on the Catalyst program, they do machine vision for autonomous vehicles. So they're not producing the vehicles. They partnered with the prime that is actually building the big overall ground vehicles to then provide a better capability for that autonomous driving capability using cameras. There's just one quick example. The overall Catalyst has more of those requirements about partnering with primes that you don't see on TACfI and TACfI. Navy SBIR Catapult is a little bit of its own beast. Again, it can be an enhancement or a sequential. There's not matching requirements with Catapult like we see with Catalyst and TACfI and TACfI. And then finally, just hitting on AppFit briefly, what's very different here is that under the AppFit program, I should say OUSW R&E now, anywhere from $10 million to $50 million in procurement funds. So that's different from these other three, and then TACfI as well, where those are research and development funds. So some different rules apply. Something we've seen in the last year now is they're doing a first iteration that's more targeted and a better fit for software, and that's actually using research and development funding instead of procurement. So there are some changes going on to AppFit overall, but generally most of the fund is procurement dollars. It is similar, I'll say, to TACfI in that you need really high-level PAE, the program office support, in order to go after it. With AppFit and TACfI, you really have to start getting into how is this going to be budgeted for, what kind of money is coming in the future in order to be competitive. You got to make a case and talk to those PAEs about that. That is significantly more difficult and a much bigger ask. Now, on the flip side of that, that actually sets you up to be successful and cross that valley of death and get to scale and get to those program offices and programs of record. So it is harder, but when done correctly, can really help you set yourself up for scale. And that's really it. So there's a quick overview. Again, that's not everything, but that is a lot of the essentials about this program. If you found it helpful or if you've got further questions, please reach out, drop me a comment, drop me a message, send us an email. We've got a lot more resources on the website as well if you want to check those out. Some that are breaking down the different matching ratios, eligibility requirements, things like that. So please reach out if you want to learn more. Thanks so much for watching.